Aloha, everybody. I'm Eva Andrade, and on this episode of the FFF podcast, Jim and I are going to be discussing Psalm 71:9 that says, "Do not cast me away when I am old. Do not forsake me when my strength is gone." How do we handle our parents or someone in our family who may need ministering at the end of their life? Let's chat about that. Jim Hochberg, it's always good to sit across the table from you.
Eva Andrade, you betcha.
So you know what's happening with my life right now. But before we jump into sharing our hearts and pouring it out on the table, we're getting raw today, Jim. We are going to get raw. But before we do that, I want you to share with people your story about your dad, because I think that's a good way to kind of get us into the subject today.
Well, I mean, my dad was a military officer. And he retired, from the Army. And he was then the executive vice president at Hawaii Pacific College, and then it became Hawaii Pacific University while he was there. So he was always like in charge. He didn't fumble. My dad was not a fumbler, right? And then he started being kind of weird. Like, just unusually not him. And as time went on, it became obvious that he was having dementia things and then Alzheimer's. And then he ended up in a couple of different care homes. And then he actually passed away in 2011 when his mind forgot how to swallow and breathe and pump his heart and, that kind of thing. So I didn't know you were going to ask me to talk about that, but I mean, it was a very hard thing to deal with.
I want to talk about that because, we focus a lot through our ministries on dealing with, people voting and paying attention to what's happening at their legislative house and making sure they raise their voices. We've talked about abortion. We've talked about the importance of kids, but we don't talk as often about how important taking care of our kapuna is as part of our ministry as well.
Do you know that I think the last time that was a topic on this show, you actually had my wife Janet, because she has a home care company.
Yes, and we were talking about
a long time ago.
We were talking about assisted suicide because that is one of the issues that we do fight. But so when we talk about this great spectrum of care, right? We want to jump in there and we want to help women who may be facing unplanned pregnancies, right? We're all about that. We're making sure that if they're facing an unplanned pregnancy, we send them to a place for women in Waipio or Pearson Place or whatever, so that they can get whatever resources they need. And there's
so you've really confused me. Are we talking about Sarah in the Old Testament being an old lady getting pregnant? You lost me.
Because you cut me off and you do this. You do this.
Well, bring me back to whatever where you're going.
I feel like we're in a courtroom here. So anyway, we've talked about that. We've talked about how important it is. Then we talk about when people are raising their families, right? They've got to pay attention to the education system, right?
I see now. Okay. These are separate stages.
Okay, yes. Now, if you had let me continue, this would have made sense. All right, everyone who's watching this on YouTube right now, please comment below.
I could be getting dementia and I was lost.
Well, I'm going to ask you about that later, but not about you getting dementia, but about steps to take. Okay, so anyway, then we talk about that, right? About parents plugging into their kids, understanding their education. And then we talk about marriage and how important marriage is, right? In fact, we promoted on our 25th anniversary, right? We had people standing up.
Yours.
Mine, Hawaii Family Forum's 25th anniversary. We talked about how great these couples were and how they got married, and some of them were married 50 plus years. My own parents celebrated 65 this year, right?
Nice.
So we talk about that. And then, of course, we talked about assisted suicide. But before we get from what happens in a young person's home into what happens at the end of someone's life during assisted suicide or when you're making that journey, there is caring for elderly parents who may not be dying, but they may have some kind of issues that requires normally the middle-aged kids to take care of their older age parents.
And that's kind of interesting because I don't know a lot of the details about Janet's clients, except I think this might be true, is that many of the older people are actually perfectly fine mentally, not like my dad, but they have other reasons they need help for physical things, but they're sharper than whatever, right? And then I guess some of them actually are, unable to make food or whatever, blah, blah, blah. But yeah.
Yeah. So my sister-in-law, who she works at Catholic Charities, she's got a position of leadership there. She talks about when I first met her in the early days of our Bible study, when we were young back then. We had very, very small kids. So we're kind of like our producer over there with his young little kids, we were at that age, right? Where we would look at older people and we'd be like, look at that sign of wisdom with your gray head, we'd just be in honor of them, But she warned us back then. She said, one day we're going to be at the bookends of our lives, right? We're going to have kids that are going to be young adults who may be experiencing things. And then now we've got our aging parents that we've got to take care of. And so we've never really talked about that. And I've never really experienced that until now, which is why we're talking about this today.
That's right. Because tell your story.
Yeah. So I have shared, and again, tying it all together, how my mother, when she was pregnant with me, was told to abort because of some medical conditions. I know. I'm glad I'm here. But so now that we're moving forward into today's topic, it all ties in, because what my mom needed, the medical care she needed back then, was when she was in high school, she had an appendicitis. And when she went into the hospital, so this would have been 1957 or 58-ish.
That's the year I was born.
Yeah. So she went in to have this. And I guess what they did back then is they would take all your intestines out to get to the appendix or something along that lines. And they would put your intestines back in. Now, when they put her intestines back in, they didn't tack it properly back to where it was supposed to be. So it never reattached the way it was supposed to. And so throughout my mom's life, she had constant obstructions because things were moving.
I had no idea that that's how they did that.
Yeah. Well, neither did I.
That is crazy.
That's a long time ago, right? I mean, that was back when they did things like, electric shock therapy and stuff. So let's just say we've come a long way. But anyway, so she's had obstructions in her life. My mom is now 85 years old, and she went into the hospital because she had an obstruction, and it was so bad that they actually had to remove all of her intestines. And so she had what they call an ileostomy. And so she now will have that bag for the rest of her life. So nothing wrong with my mom's mind, but she's 85 years old, and the surgery and everything that happens after surgery took a toll on her. And so even though she came home from the hospital, she still requires 24-hour care because she can't do everything by herself anymore. Now,
when you have a main abdominal surgery like that, because I did have abdominal surgery, you would be amazed at how you really can't move. You can't get up out of that. Those stomach muscles right there are hurting. And if you use them, it's incredibly painful.
Oh, my mom has always been an independent woman. She's always been able to do everything on her own. But now especially when she came home from the hospital, she required us to help her to the bathroom. I had to cook for them. I had to help them clean, keep their laundry, her and my dad's 87, to keep them going. My dad is beginning to show normal signs of dementia. He's 87. And so he's forgetting things. And so trying to balance this. Now, my two brothers are doing just as much as I am. So if they're listening right now, I don't want them to think, oh, look at her. She's just saying she's doing everything.
Hey, James, you're cool, man.
Yeah. Kevin, thanks for everything. But we've all had to, now we're working. My older brother, James, just retired. So he's able to do a little more, but he's helping. He's got a new grandson. So he's trying to be, the daycare person for his grandson. And then during the other time of his time taking care of my parents, my brother Kevin roofs all day. He's a roofer. And then at night he's got to go and do this. So we're looking at life a little different now. And so this scripture that I started with, do not cast me away when I am old. Do not forsake me when my strength is gone, is because looking at chat rooms and everything, people forget that the caretaker And if Janet was sitting right here, she would understand this more than most. The caretaker gets tired. The caretaker gets overwhelmed. The caretaker feels like, oh my gosh, is there anything more in my life? Is this my life now, right? And so, I want to remind everybody who's got little kids right now, these little babies you're taking care of, one day they're going to be taking care of you. And it's a full circle, right?
But there's another side to the coin, which is for some caregivers, the person that they're taking care of doesn't remember who they are, or has become more on the nasty, mean side because of their conditions and stuff like that. And that is pretty hard to suffer through because it's your parent.
It's absolutely true. And I think that what we can encourage people in the church community to do is, these are silent sufferers. That's how I'm viewing them, because what happens is they go to church every week. They're sitting there. They're not going to tell people that they're tired and they're overwhelmed. They may need to get away because everybody needs respite. Young parents need respite when they have little kids. People that are taking care of elderly parents need respite. Care workers that work need respite. Everybody needs respite. And I think this is where the church should shine.
Well, and what I would say to you is, if you didn't have siblings that were sharing the load and it was just you would need to find somebody to give you a break so you could get your respite.
And here's what we did. So maybe this will help somebody else who's going through this right now. And then we're going to look at some of the statistics that are out there on this. But what we did is we talked to my mom's doctor. And we told him, okay, this is what we're experiencing. We're trying to do everything we can to work with her, but we need help. And so the doctor actually put in a request for my mom to have a registered nurse that comes in a couple times a week. She has an occupational therapist nurse that comes in and a physical therapist nurse that comes in. And so it's really good because they've been coming in, because my mom's goal is to get back to be as much independent as she can be. Now, some people are in a different place, right? Some people are caretaking someone who's in a wheelchair and they'll never be independent again. So we have to remember that there's a big spectrum of caretakers on what they're doing in the house. But this is what we're called to do. This is what Christ asks us to do, to love our parents as much as our parents loved us when we were young and we were growing up. So let's look at some numbers here. Let's throw up the first chart, Jim, and you and I can talk about some of this stuff. Now, this came from the CDC, and this was in a 2017.
So let me ask, do we trust this CDC thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I think we trust anything as much as we can, right?
So the data presented in this brief were collected from community-dwelling adults 45 years of age and older, 2015 to 17, through something called Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System.
Right. Good. Okay. So the first thing we're looking at, right now, this is during the past 30 days. They asked the people that took this, did you or your family, hold on, let me pull it up so that I'm actually looking at it.
What is she hitting him with?
She's blow drying his hair. And first of all, that is not a he, that is a woman.
Oh.
Jim Hochberg. I apologize on behalf of Jim.
Oh, it's really big right there. I didn't notice. I'm looking at this little teeny picture down there.
Okay, so what they asked is, during the past 30 days, did you provide regular care or assistance to a friend or family member who has a health problem or disability? 22.3% of the adults reported providing care or assistance to a friend or family member in the past 30 days. And the age of these people that were taking care was 24% was 45 to 64 age. So think about that now. These are 40-year-olds to about mid-60s, right? That are caring for people in their, could be from 60s to 80s, right? Because you figure on average, there's about a 20-year difference between,
That's
on
a generation.
average. It's a generation, right? So when you think about it, an 18-year-old, right, is looking at their parents who are probably in their maybe mid-30s to late 30s. So their parents or grandparents would be in their 60s around. Their great-grandparents may be alive too.
That's true. And I do want to say that my friend Tom has a 34-year-old son who, for his entire life, has had very, very, very bad cerebral palsy and been in a wheelchair. And Tom, as a single parent, has done all the total care for him. And that's not at the end of life. That's actually from the beginning.
I think it's wonderful when you sit down and you talk with people that are in these kind of situations. They have stories to tell.
Oh, yeah.
And I love to sit and listen. I love to listen to the stories of the old people. And when I say old people, I throw myself in that category, okay? I mean, I'm kind of in there myself. But when I'm looking at the 80-year-olds and the 90-years, some of them are still going strong. Yeah. We've got people in ministry that are in their 90s that I look at them and I think, I want to grow up and be just like you because they're just out there. And you had mentioned...
That's kind of funny. I look at them and I think, well, my family don't live that long.
Oh, that's all right. Well, it is true, though. Statistics do show that people with Asian blood do tend to live a little longer. And Hawaii, actually, here in Hawaii, we have a longer life. And maybe because everything is so beautiful here, we have beautiful air, maybe it's our lifestyle, whatever it is, but we do tend to live a little older. We've got people in their hundreds that are still living and working. And maybe they're not working, but they're still telling stories in these homes. And I think we need to reach out to them because they have something to offer to the community.
Yeah.
You know, what is it about history? If you're doomed to repeat it, what's that saying?
Well, you got to know history so that you are not doomed to repeat it.
So maybe the old people could teach us a thing or two about what happened in Lahaina. We should talk to them, right, about the old days.
And you know, the other thing, too, is this recent phenomenon of a lot of friends and acquaintances that Janet and I have become seriously debilitated, and nobody wants to say, but it could be part of the whole COVID vaccination thing.
That's a whole nother show for sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so that's another layer of this topic that is going to be coming.
Well, I'll tell you what, one of the, we have a young girl that actually is part of the charismatic movement in Hawaii. And she was in her, I think she's in her late 20s and she just had a major stroke. You know, so it's like just because you're young, it doesn't mean that you might be immune from having any kind of health issues where you need caretaking, right? So I think that's the message for today is that there are people that are caretaking in our communities that we may not even know that they're caretaking and that they're suffering this. I think we just have to open our eyes and know that people that are attending church have all these needs, right? Let's look at the final slide, the estimating
Did
future
you skip the
caregiving.
one with the characteristics?
That was the first one, but we went to this one first. So rather than...
But I thought that was kind of cool. You didn't want to go look at how Hawaii is way down there? Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. So this is the characteristics of caregivers. Now, Hawaii, we're actually doing pretty good. Yeah, go back to that one. Yep, that one's perfect. So that one's pretty good because Hawaii is actually in
19%. They're in the almost not even any blue at all.
Yes, but if you look across the state, a lot of the central part of the United States have some pretty big numbers there, right?
Yeah.
Now pull up the slide where what the future is going to look like, right? Is what is it going to look like, right? Right. Hawaii looks like we're going to be at 19.2% going from today, or
estimating future caregivers.
Yes, so these would be non-caregivers age 45 years or older who expect to be caregivers. And you know what? You brought up something we didn't even really, and I really don't want to get into it on this show, but we should talk about it, is the stuff that has happened to people because some people, because of the vaccinations, have added into the care. I mean, we have a very dear friend, a mutual friend that
can't even walk.
She had the Guillain-Barre syndrome, I guess, when she got her vaccination, and so, or Guillain-Barre, I guess. Anyway, so she actually needs extra caregiving stuff. But so this is actually going to keep getting bigger, right? There's going to be more and more people doing caregiver. We see hope for my mom because we know that ultimately she's going to be able to do still mostly everything by herself. But again, she's 85. In 2 years, she's going to be 87. In 5 years, she's going to be 90. So I think that we have to understand that things for all of us that have aging parents, it's a step up.
Correct.
Well, step down. Well, I don't know. However you want to look at it.
And here's the really tragic thing that happened in the insurance market. So in 2010-ish or something like that, when my dad was showing signs of dementia and stuff like that, and I realized that my grandfather died of Alzheimer's, My dad was dying of it, and then his younger brother subsequently also died of Alzheimer's, and it passes through the male side of the family. So way back 13, 14 years ago, I was able to buy a long-term care insurance policy. So I actually have an insurance policy that will pay for my care or my facilities or whatever, but you can't get those anymore. The insurance market, because the cost is getting so high, they don't offer them anymore.
So I have a really good friend that's a geriatric doctor at Straub. And when my mom was at Straub after she'd had her surgery, he would come in and check on her. And so we would ask him a lot of questions because he's a geriatric doctor. This is what he does. And he started talking about how it's really important for people, once you turn 60, that it's not a bad idea to get a baseline test.
Which I actually did.
And that's what I was going to ask you is, because of your dad, you took a step in the right direction by at least getting a baseline.
That's right. The saddest, it was like, it hit me like a ton of bricks. So I'm sitting in the waiting room of this doctor that was going to test and do all this stuff. And I'm sitting there and I look up, and I actually took a picture of it and sent it to Janet. It said there were like 2 reception desks behind plastic. One of them said geriatric patients, and it was like, holy crap.
Yeah, that's you. That's you.
It's me now.
I remember meeting your dad, and you and I laughed about this.
He was kind of in that zone when you met him out in the front yard.
He was, and it was funny because you and I had known each other for years. I had no idea that you actually grew up right across the street from my sister-in-law. See,
Correct.
This is how we roll in Hawaii.
Yep.
You meet people, and then you realize, I went to school with your mother's brother's friends, cousins, nieces, uncle, right? And everybody knows everybody. So I go to my sister-in-law's house. I park right in front of your old house that you grew up in, not knowing that it was your old house. And I see this man, and he's outside working in the yard, elderly man, and he's wearing his military uniform with all his medals and pajama pants.
Yeah, that's what I mean. See, that was like not my dad my whole life. It's hard to figure out what is going on when they're weird, when they never were before.
But Jim, I got to say, it was precious. It was absolutely precious because I got out of my car and he said hello. And I said, hello, I'm a very friendly person. So I just started chatting with your dad. And I don't know how we got on the subject, but somehow you came up.
I wasn't there.
No, the topic of your name. And I don't know how it came up, but saying something about Jim Hochberg. And he said, that's my son. And I was like, what? And then I called you and you're like, yeah, where are you? And then I said, I'm on Hakamoa. And you said, oh my God, you grew up. So my sister-in-law is much younger than you.
Correct.
But she knew
a lot of people are.
But she knew your sister,
Correct.
Your youngest sister, I think. But anyway, your dad was super, super precious. Now,
yes.
What was his caretaking situation at this point? Who was taking care of him?
So at that point, my mom died in 1991. She had cancer and she died. Actually, we hospiced her on Hakamoa Street in the house, and she passed away right there. So about 5 or 10 years after my mom died, my dad met the mother of the people that lived across the street from him directly. And they ended up getting married. And she had actually been some kind of a nurse when she was younger. And so she was doing a lot of the caretaking just by virtue of being his wife and having been a nurse and, kind of knowing all that stuff. But then it got to the point where she couldn't do it. And he was then in a series of different community living places where they had, 24-hour, because he'd get up and split, walk somewhere and they wouldn't be able to find him.
Yeah.
That kind of, stuff. So at the beginning, his wife was.
One of the things I want to talk about in these last couple of minutes is I want to get to the CDC actually has a call to action to kind of prepare people. So Jim, you can go down those
So
bullet
are you
points.
going to put this somewhere to be?
Yeah, I'm going to put the link to this so that people can look at this whole CDC. But before you go into that, I just want to share one quick story with my brother Eric when he was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. And he was actually on his final journey before he went to be with the Lord. We saw him walking down the aisle at Straub, and he was carrying his IV. And I asked him, what are you doing? And he said, I'm praying for people. And here my brother was, he was soon going to go to be with Jesus, and he was praying for people in the hospital because he said, there are some people here that have nobody coming in to see them. And I think that is a travesty. You know, here we are, Christians. I don't believe anybody should be dying alone in a hospital. I think that there are some people who have a gift. Your wife, Janet, is one of them, to work with people, to be caretakers. But we also need to be caretakers of the caretakers. You know, if we're not called to caretake, then we need to be doing what we can to care. But so, Jim, give us some of those bullet points very briefly.
So the call to action in this CDC brief is for public health care professionals to do things. And they need to increase messaging that emphasizes both the importance of caregivers and the importance of maintaining the caregiver's health and well-being, to educate the public about the importance of caregiving before they begin it, and about the resources and the support that's available. Educate healthcare providers to be mindful of health risks for caregivers, because you are picking people up, you're bathing them, you're moving them around, and everybody's not my mom's size. You know, she was tiny. Evaluate caregiver training and support programs, which interestingly enough is what Janet's company does. Estimate the gap between workforce capacity and anticipated demand for services to be able to support people with dementia and disabilities and their caregivers. Increase awareness of and access to evidence-based programs. I like evidence-based programs. And services that can help caregivers and care recipients and increase access to programs and services. Encourage caregivers to get regular checkups, preventative stuff and all like that. And finally, ensure that caregivers with a disability and or chronic diseases have access to self-management, because like you said, they need respite too.
Yes. And we are going to end on 1 Timothy 5:8. But if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever.
Oh, my translation says infidel.
Okay. Well,
I like that better.
So make sure you stay tuned here at Faith and Family First. And we want to make sure that you like, share, subscribe. Hit that notification button so you know every time we upload a new video, and we upload new videos weekly. Comment.
Become a sponsor of this show.
And we weren't trying to grow, you know.
Share it.
Yeah.
Get your friends to watch.
And give us some ideas of what you'd like us to cover. And we will see you all next week. Mahalo, everybody.
Aloha.